everything and anything that has happened has shaped us on how, and our vision, our mission, and our whole purpose, that we want to save a million lives using health AI. By being contactless, it is so amazing and so simple that all that patient has to do is just sleep peacefully on the bed, which they anyways have to do. And Dozee starts monitoring, and in case it finds that this patient is going into the red flag zone, it immediately flags it and escalates it to nursing, and that is how they can take corrective action quickly. I think only 20 or top 20 to 30% of the people only, and that too I'm being more optimistic right now, that they have the access to healthcare. With this, what would happen is that it will reach everywhere, right? And that is what will happen in next 1 decade.
So how much of an information does this pick, or what's the threshold, and based on what parameters does the device make an analysis?
More than 95% of the patients, right, that Dozee sees, we are able to predict and we are able to alert the healthcare professionals almost 16 hours in advance before a kind of a deterministic health deterioration event happens. So the way healthcare AI actually works is that it needs human in the loop, right? Because the final judgment is always the human.
Hello and welcome to The Interface, the Hindus podcast to make sense of the accelerating pace of change underpinned by technology. I'm your host, John Xavier. AI is personalizing healthcare through remote chatbots, remote patient monitoring systems, personalized regimens, and contactless vital monitoring. There are a lot of instances where wearable devices and sensors with smartwatches and embedded sensors are also being used to track vital signs like heart rate and blood pressure. One such contactless remote monitoring patient system is Dozee, an AI-powered triaging system for hospitals that captures real-time body vitals, providing continuous monitoring and alerts. In today's episode, Dozee's CEO and co-founder Mudit Dandwate joins me to discuss how AI is personalizing healthcare and making advances in fields, and what are some of the challenges that such systems face. Mudit, welcome to The Interface.
Thanks a lot, John. It's so amazing to be here, and such a wonderful introduction. It was so amazing hearing it from you.
Thanks, Mudit. And thanks for making the time. I think you need a little more introduction because of the whole way through which you got into the healthcare. So after you started out from IIT Bombay, you go on to making electric race car designs, and then a tragic accident that ends quite well, where you go to save your dog from a crocodile. In the process, you lose your arm. And you then get into a totally different industry and start working on a different problem. Could you give a sense on how you got to healthcare?
Sure. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, my first passion, right, was race cars. And when I was growing up, my dreams was, that I wanted to create my own race car. And sure, I did. So I built almost 4 race cars, India's first electric race car, and went on to, join a company where I learned the trade even more of how to monitor things on a continuous basis. And, using sensors, telemetry, all the technology, analytics, you can improve, right, and preempt so many things and save dollars as well as, in fact, human lives as well, right? Because race cars can be risky. While, all this was going on, which was the life in a fast lane, one very slightly disturbing episode happened in life in which, I nearly lost my uncle to sepsis in hospital in India. And that really shook me that, here we are monitoring every aspect of car health. But when it comes to human life, right, as in we are not continuously doing that. And because of that, there are lots of leakages in the systems, and we are losing human lives over there, right? So why not every patient be monitored. Why not? Because they are at risk, right, in the hospitals, even when they are at home as well, right? When these high risk patients, when they are at home, why not, we have systems which continuously monitors them, and we use AI and the advancements which are happening in machine learning and all, right? So this is almost 9 years back that I'm talking about. So using all of that, we preempt things, and that's what led to the foundation of Dozee. The crocodile accident did happen, but that happened after I had started Dozee, right? So that was almost when we were 2 years into the startup, and then this accident had happened. But of course, what we are today, everything and anything that has happened has shaped us on how, and our vision, our mission, and our whole purpose, that we want to save 1 million lives using health AI, and that's exactly what we are on to right now.
That's great. That part of history I wasn't aware of. Can you tell me something more about how this personalization is changing? I mean, when you started Dozee, this is pre-pandemic, and a lot of things is happening even in the world of AI. So, how are these AI systems personalizing healthcare? And could you also talk to the accuracy on based on which these systems provide inputs to doctors and nurses?
Sure. See, before I delve into health AI itself, right, let me talk about the trend of the world, right, which is the AI. So what we are seeing as AI today is honestly the boom that we are seeing is because of two very important things that has happened, right? One is the world went on internet, so thereby a lot of data collection happened, whether we liked it or not. A lot of data collection happened, right? And today what we are seeing as AI bots is actually trained by every conversation that happened, right, in a way over the internet, and that's one. The second part to that is the chip development, the GPUs, the cores, and all of that developed over time, and that has led to this where we are today, which is a fantastic place that we are, and we are seeing the different applications which are there in LLMs and so on. And that is exactly something that we realized about 9 years back that would happen and should happen, honestly, in the world of health AI as well. And that is the niche that we took. And because of that itself, we started that, health AI is the ultimate answer for sure, right? I think that is how it has to be. That, why can't the bed that we are in, why can't the furniture that being in, and again, I'm talking something which is more like Star Wars. And actually, to be honest, it's in one of the movies called Big Hero 6. If I don't know whether you have seen that, but just by scanning a person itself, right, they would that would realize that what the person is going through and can happen, and preemptively that robot will take care of the patient. And that's, we thought, this is amazing, and why can't we do something like this? But we realized for that what is required is the biggest problem is that the current standard of care itself, right? If you think about it, we are getting very very few data points right now, only 4 to 6 in the entire day. Imagine, and that is what we are using to judge the stability of close to 95% of the patients. So anyone who is outside ICU, we have only manual spot checks where the data collection is happening, right? So we wanted to make first change that why can't this be continuous and happening in every bed? And for that, we innovated the contactless system. By being contactless, it is so amazing and so simple that all that patient literally has to do is just lie down on the bed, and that's it. You don't. There are no wires, no cuffs, no electrodes, no hindrance at all. And all that patient has to do is just sleep peacefully on the bed, which they anyways have to do. And Dozee starts monitoring, and in case it finds that this patient is going into the red flag zone, it immediately flags it and escalates it to nursing, and that is how they can take corrective action quickly. That is something which I talked about Dozee per se, but the health care is way way broader as well, right? As you mentioned, so personalization goes to next level, even in terms of medications as well. Today what we see, what is the current standard of care, the medications are very broad spectrum, they are all generalized and all of that, right? As in, everyone reacts to medicines differently, right? Because we are all different human beings. So the future of medicine really will lie in that for me, the medicine to treat, whatever I'm going through will be different from what probably you are going through, John. And there are so many more things that we can talk about, but the future is just amazing with all of these things which will happen, and that will truly transform the way healthcare is delivered. And two main changes will happen. One, because of this, the healthcare will become sharper for sure. It will become better. Outcomes will improve. Costs will reduce. All of that will happen. But one thing which I am excited about the most is that, I believe that in the world that we are living, one of the biggest problem is access to healthcare is still, very bad. I think only 20 or top 20 to 30% of the people only, and that too, I'm being more optimistic right now that they have the access to healthcare. With this, what would happen is that it will reach everywhere, right? And that is what will happen in next 1 decade. And I hope while that is happening, Dozee is right at the forefront of that.
That's interesting. And so right now, the place that this Dozee equipment goes is largely in ICU beds.
No,
What's the okay?
actually, yeah, it's actually the other way around. It's everything but ICU beds. Not that it can't work in ICU bed, but ICU beds are already continuously monitored, right? So I don't think they probably require Dozee, but where you require it more is everywhere there is nothing, right?
Now, yeah.
So
So one of the things,
ward
the
beds,
reason,
home beds, and all of that, right? As in, people are at home, who is monitoring them? People are in wards, nurses only monitoring once every 4 to 6 hours. In
right.
case of my uncle itself, where I started from my story, in that what happened? He was in an infection control ward, and therefore he was kind of isolated because he was immunocompromised. Therefore, no one was supposed to meet him. And because of that, when he collapsed, no one even realized for good 9 hours that something like this has happened. And that is exactly what I'm saying, as in why, with the advancements in sensors, technologies, and all of that, we just don't have these restrictions that, if a human is not observing, then it is not being observed. It's not like that, right? We can do a lot more, beyond the capabilities of human also now.
Right. And the reason I asked about that is largely when you look at any kind of, let's say a personal use mattress or something at home where you have the system, the amount of time that you spend lying down is sort of limited. So how much of an information does this pick, or, what's the threshold? And based on what parameters does the device make an analysis and say that, the vitals are fine, or these are some areas that needs to be measured? How do you get into a mode where you say, this is where the patient needs help, or this is where they don't? What goes into that kind of decision making by this device?
So yeah, as in very, very good question. I would say that, Dozee, although is known and obviously started from being a contactless system, it's a comprehensive system. It is not just restricted to the contactless non-wearable. We have wearable versions also, right? So these patients who require even continuously, we have even wearables as well, right? But the best part is that no one wants to wear anything, and still, if you want to monitor, right? And because they are patients, so imagine, we are not talking about you and me over here, probably, who are doing good right now. We are talking about patients who are supposed to heal. And where do people heal, right? They're supposed to sleep, they're supposed to lie down on the bed, isn't it? We're talking about patients at risk over here, and they are mostly on bed, right? So while that is there, we have even wearable version as well. So then when they are coming out, you can simply put it, on your wrist, and all of that as well. But based on all of these different, things, the parameters that it monitors is heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, temperature, and even things like bed occupancy, when the patient came out of the bed, when the patient's posture is what, the accelerations, movements. So all of these information is used to make a judgment on that, and which is not very different to what even happens in an ICU also, right? So it's exactly that, just a very different technology that makes it very, very convenient and easy, both for the patient and the nursing as well as everyone. And therefore we are able to penetrate. And many of the hospitals today, right, in India, nearly around 300 hospitals, now in US more than 26 hospitals that we have, We are not in one bed or two bed, right? Every bed is literally on Dozee, right? In fact, we have a kind of a war cry called her bed, Dozee bed, right, internally into the company, and which we also use it everywhere. Meaning that, we are creating a technology that scales to every bed, right? And that is exactly what we do.
Interesting. So I'd like to take it to more on the personalized care itself. So given that, this monitoring and all that is happening, how do
Yeah.
we get into this predictive system? Because there are some people who speak about how predictive systems can get certain things wrong. So how do we look at, let's say, false positives
Yeah.
in a predictive AI regimen? I mean, what sort of things go into such systems, and how do you spot it?
Got it. So, see, the way in which we establish all of this is through different clinical trials, right? That what is the false positivity rates and things like that, right? I can share some results which we already published. So, nearly around more than 95% of the patients, right, that Dozee sees, we are able to predict and we are able to alert the healthcare professionals almost 16 hours in advance before a kind of a deterministic health deterioration event happens, right? So 16 hours in advance, more than 95% of the patient, right? So that is the kind of efficacy that the system has. Now, what it does, that it actually is kind of a safety net, right? It is not replacing anything which is there already. What it is doing, it is making things much more proactive, where nurse is supposed to go and check it in case Josie is saying that, hey, this patient's heart rate is high, much earlier, right, than generally anyone would have observed, or respiration or dip in BP, or even just the values, right? Even the fact that the respiration has become more choppy. Respiration is looking like a more pathological condition now, right? Which might be harmful for the patient. So that kind of identifies that, flags it, which nurse and professional is supposed to go and check. And this is exactly what it does, right? So the way healthcare AI actually works is that it needs human in the loop, right? Because the final judgment is always the human. And as I was, even jokingly telling you as well, that how my prosthetic is no replacement to my hand, right? In general, I can of course do a lot of things, but right, the technology has limitations, right? Dozee can alert, but Dozee cannot take an action. The action has to be taken by the professional only. So even validating that and ensuring that high heart rate is there, but whether it is fatal high heart rate or not so fatal high heart rate, that is something which is still on the clinicians, and we trust them on that, right? So they use their all medical knowledge and training to ensure that they make it better. Just to kind of wrap it up and give you, but what is the outcome of this, right? Many of the hospitals that we are in, they have reported drastic drops in code blue events, nearly around 90% drop in code blue events. Code blue event is when patient absolutely goes in cardiopulmonary dysfunction and has only some time left before they'll be entirely compromised. And that's where a rapid response team and code blue prevention team is kind of called, and chaos goes on in a hospital, alarms goes on, and Dozee entirely prevents that. It does two things: it saves cost, it saves lives, because the success rates of these events is not so great, right? So better to prevent it. Similarly, falls go down. Similarly, pressure ulcers go down, and all these are events which are entirely avoidable, right? UTIs go down, urinary tract infections, or they are caught earlier. As in, Dozee cannot avoid that, but Dozee can tell you that the onset has happened much earlier, and that is exactly how we are able to create that impact. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm a little curious to understand, how do you kind of prioritize the algorithm within Dozy? Let's say, what are some of the top things that you pick and say, these are certain things that is, showing an issue with the patient, or these are certain things that is fine. So I'm sure that, this is something that will be a mirror of what hospitals have as a record. But largely, this is also for the listeners to understand how these systems kind of work from the background. Could you give a
Yeah.
sense on how it prioritizes and, gives like a report on, this is fine, this is not fine, this is good, something like that?
Correct. No, very good question. In fact, where you have led me is absolutely where the personalization comes in, right? So you have to understand that every patient is different, right? It cannot be one shoe that fits all. So what generally happens is that in the patients, right, as in this information lies in their history, in their, in what is the condition with which or the complaint with which they had been admitted, primary conditions, secondary conditions, and all of that, right? So this information generally makes the care plan more personalized. What I'm trying to say in a more layman and simpler terms, that imagine if a patient is has just come out of a bypass surgery or something. Now they are supposedly at much higher chances of something like an atrial fibrillation. So therefore, a kind of a alert, right, that their rhythm has become irregular earlier, right, becomes much more critical than probably someone else who has come there only for a fracture, right, out there. For them, the parameter to be monitored might be slightly different, right? So that's how again I'm exactly trying to explain that Dozee does like full comprehensive monitoring, but for every patient, those parameters which will matter will differ, over there. While, of course, there are certain conditions that applies to all, right? If you suddenly see a dip in BP, now regardless of what conditions or what patient or whatever it is dangerous, right? So you immediately alert. Similarly, another example let me give you is even as simple thing as posture change, right? A patient is there who is a stroke patient or a paralytic patient who is non-ambulatory. So they are at very high chance because they are not naturally moving their body, so they are at very high risk of developing pressure ulcers or bed sores, right, in other words. Now, this patient, we have to also track that whether they are able to change the posture either themselves, if not, then if someone else is doing that or not periodically. And if for a sustained period of time this has not happened and the pressure has built up, then the alarm has to go on. Otherwise, this patient will, develop a pressure ulcer. So that's how for every patient, imagine Dozee doesn't work exactly in the same way, it works differently. It also learns from you also, right? For patient who might be at home, and I'm again giving you some example, if, it will behave differently from someone who is a smoker versus a non-smoker. It will kind of behave differently for someone who has just come out of cancer versus someone who is maybe preparing for a marathon. So like that, Dozee learns in those first 5 or 6 nights and kind of does that adjustment to ensure that it sees the deviations from your own baselines, right? So that's how it works differently for everyone. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So I presume that it also builds in a kind of, so starting point for those would be a profile of the patient, getting their basal information on, what's their current heart rate and all that, just a kind of a general checkup. And from there, it starts doing its analysis and tracks the patient.
So Dozee integrates to the hospital's EHR also, right? So really from there, it's also, it kind of takes that information to personalize things as well.
Got it. And now I want to take a step outside of the hospitals and then, get your sense on, what's largely happening on the wellness front or more of preventive care. So probably maybe this is not something that Dozee is already doing, but as a person who's been in this particular area and who's got a significant expertise on these topics, what's happening largely on personalized healthcare from the wellness side, for people who are doing well as they are, so they can, keep themselves healthy and safe so that they don't have to have a regular hospital checkup.
Yeah, I am no expert of this field, honestly, right? But I will definitely give you my take, right? And of course, you and the listeners can choose whether they agree or not. I think a lot is happening on nutrition front, which I find that is something which is very much needed. That's very correct. What we eat, what we breathe, what we drink builds up our body. And the other part is what we think and how not just we think, but how do we de-think or how do we de-stress ourselves, right? Is the second influencer of our health. Then of course is the the physical activity and all of that, but that's the third element. And the last part of well-being is also about the general societal presence and all of that, right? So all of these things together, in my opinion, determine the well-being of one person, right, as a whole, as an individual, as a place in the society as well. And I think a lot of re-engineering is going on, and I don't agree to most a lot of it. Right, I think for well-being we have to look more within and know ourselves much better, and that is something which is supposed to happen rather than download more apps and get more confused about it. And one most important thing, sorry, just to put it over there for me personally, right, which I take care of, which in a way I covered, was actually sleep, right? That is the most important part of our day, right? As in, and I can say, seeing different lifestyles. In fact, I am right now, as I speak, I am jet lagged. So I am also, again, should not speak a lot about that because I'm myself not, doing full justice to my body on that. But I try to. That, one thing which is non-compromisable for me is actually the sleep. And so minimum 7-8 hours is required given amount of cognitive efforts which are happening right all across the industry right now. So yeah.
That's interesting. And I think with that, I also want to tie to your own personal experience, and then we can close the episode. It's not an easy thing to kind of lose an arm, but I'm sure that you should have gone through a phase through which you kind of came out, and then you built this prosthetic for yourself. So in the context of speaking about personal health care, and then you're talking about how in certain aspects the latest technology doesn't do as much. How do you kind of come out of such situations? What's the kind of process that you kind of went through?
So the process that I went through, John, was of twofold, right? One, of me having an ability on myself as an engineer that I knew I could do something for myself, that I can overcome this, right? Because I really believe in one fact that what really makes us humans is our problem solving skills, and this is just another problem which has come up, and I think I can solve it, right? As in, one most interesting line which I think I had spoken in front of a very very big doctor when he had seen me pre-accident and post accident. He asked me that you seem so normal, as in how come you are able to adjust so well. So I told him that one thing is there is that I don't think this anyways, as in losing an arm at all limits my abilities by any ways, because finally going beyond the physical limits is what makes us human. As in, when did we have wings but we do fly, right? So how do you think by not having one hand I am going to be limited by any ways, right? And therefore, very recently I watched this movie as well of Abhishek Bachchan, and I'm really sorry, but I forgot the name of the wonderful actress who was also in that, called Ghumar, right? It's a must watch, right? If you have to understand the psyche of someone who has had arm. These are two very different things, right? Someone who is born with no arm, and someone or one less limb, and someone who has gone through an accident in a fairly old age. These are two very different things, and it was amazing. I would say it has been an amazing experience, right? This was also a learning, and and I feel this is not a big issue at all, right? So that is how probably I have adjusted to that.
Right. Yeah, and also just thinking, I mean, it's the same, this doctor that you spoke to, you just mentioned, before losing the arm and after losing the arm. So, though, imagine a system where, you had to go through a kind of an AI assistant phase, pre and post. So whatever that AI knew about you would have to kind of, relearn, post you losing the arm, because a lot of things change, not just physiologically, but also mentally, right? So
Correct.
the way in which adaptability happens to humans is still a lot more advanced, and AI can't get to that stage at the
100%.
moment, right?
100%. 100%. So as much as I am, I'll tell you one thing, right? I build AI. That doesn't mean, as in I am still, believer of the fact it is a long, long way to go. And AI has to be used in more of an assistive come, repetitive jobs where AI does wonderful things. But where it comes to, every day is a new experience and you have to do something, you don't know how do you have to react. I think, and that is exactly where you need the human intelligence. And that is the reason why, I'll still prefer, if at all ever that happens, right? I like to be operated by a human than by an AI. By robot is a different thing. It is, kind of assisted and the decisions are taken by the doctor. That is what is the most important thing. Because the human part of it, that, when it is about taking a trade-off, A or B, I trust humans on that more.
Great. On that note, I think we can give a nice close to this episode. Mudit, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you're jet lagged. It's been a pleasure connecting with you and getting to know more about personalized healthcare. And thanks again for taking the time, and all the very best.
Thanks a lot, John. It was wonderful. What an amazing question set it was. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Interface Podcast. For more such episodes on technology and innovation, tune in to the Interface on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Do share your comments with us at the interface at thehindu.co.in. To keep yourself updated with the latest tech, please go to thehindu.com or follow us on all social media platforms. Thank you.